So I think it's really important for anybody who's trying to get into this to understand that not all journalists are alike. They're all humans with different ways of operating. And you're going to be successful as a PR person if you kind of can target the way you communicate with these journalists.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast that's here to help you reach and engage more of your ideal customers online. And sometimes reaching and engaging them is not a direct path. Sometimes it happens indirectly, like getting some news coverage. And that's what we're going to look at today. My name is Rich Brooks. I'm your host. This is episode 590, powered by Flight New Media. If your to-do list includes Google Ads, SEO, or finally updating an old website that launched during the first Trump administration, we can help. We've been supporting small businesses since 1997. Let us support you too. Just reach out at takeflight.com or theagentsofchange.com, and I will personally get back to you. Here in Maine, we have an evening news program on the NBC affiliates called 207. The reason it's called 207? It's the only area code in the great state of Maine. 207's been on the air a little more than 20 years, and I've been their tech guru for over 15 of those years, doing monthly segments on artificial intelligence, taking better pictures with your smartphone, and my latest was on how to keep your tech safe in Maine during the summer. Why have they had me as their go-to recurring guest for over 75% of the show's history? Why am I the longest-lasting person on the show, excluding one of the hosts, Rob Caldwell? Is it my charming wit? My self-deprecating humor? My dimples? Well, those don't hurt, but they're not the real reason. Since the very beginning, I've been suggesting about 90% of the show's topics we cover, and I send the show the questions they should ask me and the answers I'll provide a few days before we tape the segment. I include links to any of the websites or products I review. In some cases, I'll record myself using apps on my phone or computer so they can use those clips for B-roll. I do this because it makes my life easier, but more importantly, it makes their lives easier. Rob has told me on more than one occasion that I'm the easiest interview he does because I take care of all the details. So why am I sharing this? Well, it might help you out if you ever get the opportunity I did when they wanted me to come in and talk about a new business tool called blogging all those years ago. But it also fits nicely with today's topic about public relations in the digital age and about making journalists' lives easier. In this day and age where people regularly say things like lamestream media, scream fake news anytime they hear something that doesn't agree with their worldview, and the government bans them from press conferences because they use the term Gulf of Mexico, helping a journalist by making their job easier can pay benefits to you and your business as well. Let's dive in. My next guest is known as the PR Maven. She has owned her own PR agency, Marshall Communications, for nearly 35 years. Her agency's areas of expertise are tourism, outdoor recreation, and economic development. Personal branding is one of her offerings. When it comes to media relations, she and her team know what it takes to generate publicity, coverage in the media. Today, we're going to be discussing how your business can earn media through insider PR strategies with Nancy Marshall. Nancy, welcome to the podcast.
Rich, I am so happy to be here, and I just think you're awesome. And every time I see you, you bring a smile to my face. So thank you for having me.
This is how I want every guest to introduce themselves on the show going forward. I just start putting that out there in the universe. You and I have been friends for years, and you even spoke at the most recent Agents of Change conference here in Portland, Maine. Somehow I never got you on the show, and that was obviously a terrible oversight for me. But for listeners who may not be as familiar with your work, can you just share a bit on how you got started in PR and media relations?
Well, I'm grateful to my father, who has been gone from this earth since 2006, but he was an electrical engineer with Westinghouse, and he knew the PR people in the headquarters down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And he knew that I had the same personality type and skill set as those people. So when I was 19 years old and still in college, he flew me down to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania I was at Colby at the time, and I was doing liberal arts at Colby, but I didn't really have a career path mapped out. So I spent about 3 days job shadowing the PR staff at Westinghouse. And after that, I came home and I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do PR. So from the time I got out of college, I worked for Maine Public Broadcasting. Then I worked for Sugarloaf basically for a long, long time and started my agency when I was 31 years old. And here I am. And you know what, Rich? I possibly could retire. I have no plans or desire to retire. I am having so much fun. It's like, I don't see any need to retire.
I think you and I are cut from the same cloth when it comes to that. I don't see any finish line. It's just I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. So in the bio, I mentioned that you've been running Marshall Communications for nearly 35 years, which tops even Flight New Media at 28, which means that when you got started, digital probably really wasn't a big part of public relations. What do you feel has changed in your industry over the years, especially in regards to digital?
Well, I'm grateful to Chip Carey, who was my boss at Sugarloaf. He was vice president of marketing. And I reported to him for many years early on in my career. And when the internet became a thing and technology started taking over from the old-fashioned typewriters and the postal mail, which is what we used to use, he called me Briggs. Briggs is my maiden name. He's like, Briggs, you got to stay on top of this technology stuff because it's really going to change public relations. And I'm like, okay, Chip. I didn't really know what he meant by that, but it's like, okay, I'll do whatever you say. And, back then I built a database in DBase 3 Plus, which was kind of like coding. I had about 1,500 media contacts, and I had all this information in the database about my contacts. So I knew who wrote about alpine skiing or cross-country skiing or freestyle skiing or even golfing. And I had them all broken down by their mailing addresses because that's how we used to send out press releases. But I learned that's how you could really target your media contacts. So I could call up all the media people that wrote about golf and Nordic skiing who lived in New Jersey, for example. Mm-hmm. So the press releases I was sending out, I didn't just send the same press release to 1,000 people or 1,500 people. I would try to niche down. And it's really interesting how now we talk so much about targeting your audience, but I was doing that in the 80s. I'm not bragging or anything, but right. I have understood with media people that somebody who's at a business newspaper like Maine Biz, for example, they don't want to get a press release about cooking or, anything that doesn't have anything to do with business. They want to know that you're targeting them. So that's true with all marketing, obviously, is like we really want to be targeting and we want to understand the personas who we're going after. And I've been doing that since the 80s.
Nice. In DBase. It reminds me of going to high school and practicing COBOL with the punch cards that we used to have. So I mentioned earned media earlier. Can you just break down for us the differences between earned media, paid media, and owned media so we better understand the landscape here?
Sure. Earned media is what you get as a result of either a press release or a pitch or a journalist covering an event or a story. With earned media, you can't really tell a journalist how you want the story to come out. They are journalists, which means they're reporting on something and they want you to give them information and perhaps some quotes. But journalists do not want you to tell them what to write. And they're actually kind of offended if you do. Paid media is advertising, which could take the form of online advertising. We do a lot of paid digital, or we do print advertising, or there's advertising on television, advertising on streaming services. But that's something you pay for and you can control the message. So if, for example, they get it wrong, you can call and say, I'm paying for this, straighten it out, change it. So, and then owned media is this things you own, and email newsletters are owned media, and email newsletters are really valuable. Email lists, as you know, Rich, are like you own that list. And that could be almost the most valuable asset that a marketing department or a company has, is that email list. So I think some people think that it's more important to have an account on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. But Meta or all those companies own that. They can take it away from you at any time. Whereas your email list you own it. They can't take it away from you.
So Nancy, when you're working with your clients, how do you balance those three, the earned, the paid, and the owned media? Do they work together? Are they separate in their own silos?
No, first of all, you have to start with your targeted audience or audiences. So you should understand who you're going after, whether it's a customer or a client, or even an influencer might be your targeted audience. But you need to understand who you're trying to get at, and then you can understand better what methods to use. But I always feel like getting earned media is really valuable because it's third-party testimonial you're not saying we are the best. It's a journalist saying they are the best, or a journalist saying something good about you. And I love to generate earned media, like an article in a newspaper. People still do read newspapers, or a story on the TV news, or you're on 207 on News Center Maine. So getting something on there and then sharing it on social, because when you have something you've earned and then you share it with your audiences on social, it has a lot more legitimacy than you just making a post and talking about yourself. So that's why I feel that earned media is still important. And I feel, unfortunately, public relations or media relations gets dissed by a lot of people. I heard Andrew Davis, who's quite a thought leader in our field, he said public relations doesn't exist anymore. And I'm like, I got so mad, and I haven't really had a chance to tell him yet how mad that made me. But there still is a great demand, and it's all part of a marketing strategy, but it's ultimately, it's gained at, or it's intended to communicate with your targeted audiences and targeted publics. And the media are part of your publics. Then there's also thought leaders, and there's civic leaders, there's elected officials. So when we do our Marshall Plan, which I have a banner behind me about the Marshall Plan, we make a list of all of those targeted audiences and the best way to connect our messages and stories with those people.
So some of the things about earned media that make it more difficult and thus more interesting is that there does seem to be the gatekeepers out there. And there is this idea of journalistic integrity. So it's like they're not taking bribes to put your stories in there. They're not taking money to put your stories out there. So there is that gatekeeper influence. There's a halo effect, if you will, when it does come to that earned media, would you say?
Right. Yes. And, you just mentioned the term influencer. Influencers are people that you can pay. You can give them your product for free, or, sometimes they charge thousands and thousands of dollars for one or two posts. But no, you can't tell a journalist that they have to, you can't just send them an email or call them up and say, we are the best. They're going to be like, well, why? And that's going to be an instant turnoff if you expect them to write about you or report on you that way. And I do worry about young people coming into our profession who really don't understand that you don't just tell a journalist what to say. That's not a good way to start a relationship with a journalist. I think of Rob Caldwell. Again, he's the host on 207, and I've known him for a long, long time. And I still, if I present him with a story, I know that probably half the time he's going to say no. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to go back another time. I'm kind of like,
absolutely. Right.
I just keep coming back and again and again. I'm kind of like a vacuum cleaner salesman. I just knock it on the door.
It's so funny. So you and I are of a certain age where, it used to be journalism was untouchable. These days, there's definitely some people who question the credibility of quote unquote mainstream media. Has that impacted the approach to PR at all? Or do you just still consider them to be kind of like the gatekeepers, the people that you need to get in front of to be able to get that earned media?
Well, certainly if I don't know a journalist and I'm approaching them either by email or phone or asking for a coffee date, I'm going to approach them in a very respectful manner and treat them like a journalist, where it's their choice whether or not they find my story newsworthy. But over the years, I've developed relationships with these journalists, and I have hundreds, if not thousands, of relationships. And I think that's actually, as you might know, one of the keys to my success is I really am pretty good at connecting with people. And I have this mental Rolodex where I kind of keep track of who's who and what they're interested in. And sometimes you do have lunch with somebody or maybe have a drink or a cup of coffee, and you're like, okay, here's 3 stories that I think are really great. And you kind of just watch how they react and respond. And over time, you get to know who's interested in what types of stories. And then David Sharp is somebody who was with the Associated Press here in Maine for many, many years. And he was following a story that I was pitching from Sugarloaf of this Paul Shipper, who's a guy who skied like every day. Sugarloaf was open for 24 years. He skied 3,903 days consecutively, except for in the summer. But, and I knew that over the years, David Sharp from the AP was really intrigued with this guy, Paul Shipper. He wasn't even a very good skier. He was a pretty intermediate skier.
You would think after nearly 4,000 days, he would have gotten a little better.
He might have got a little better, but I mean, he got pretty old too. He was in his 80s and he kept going out there. And he would go out there. He had a cancer diagnosis towards the end, and his surgeon wanted him to go in and have something removed. I'm not sure what it was. It was something in his internal organs, but he said, no, I got to finish the ski season before you take that thing out with cancer.
That's so funny.
So anyway, I knew that David Sharp was kind of interested in updates. So I would pick up the phone and call David Sharp, or if I ran into him somewhere, I'd be like, oh yeah, Paul's still at it. So that's another thing that, again, if you pay attention to who's reporting on what, you get to know not only what stories they're interested in, but how they want you to communicate with them. If they want to wait till you're face to face and you're having a drink or a coffee and you just update them, or some want to be an email. I text with some of my journalist friends. And so I think it's really important for anybody who's trying to get into this to understand that not all journalists are alike. They're all humans with different ways of operating. And you're going to be successful as a PR person if you can target the way you communicate with these journalists.
One of the things that seems to be a theme in this conversation is relationships. And I can vouch for you because you and I went out for lunch maybe a month or so ago to talk about something, and everybody seemed to know you and everybody seemed to want to talk to you while we were out to lunch. We kept on running into people we knew, especially people who knew you. So, and this is obviously, you're leveraging both personal relationships. You've also always been connected with technology to make the most of these relationships. Is this something that somebody can do internally, or is this really only something that a dedicated PR professional, whether internal or external, is able to do? And maybe another way of asking it is like, can a business owner or marketer, as part of all the things they need to do, be able to do what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think they can. And part of it is being curious about all people. I'm curious about journalists, but I'm pretty much curious about everyone. As a matter of fact, it's almost a problem. I almost have this compulsion because when I walk down the street or when I'm in a restaurant, if I don't know somebody, I want to know them. And I'm just really curious about people. And when I meet a person, I really do try to listen and learn. I mean, some people might think I'm so extroverted, I'm just always talking, but I do actually stop and listen and try to remember something. So the next time I see them, I can remember that they're really into dogs or fishing or whatever, and then ask about that. And I think that's been part of my success. It's as basic as I smile a lot, Rich, and people like a person who smiles. People are attracted to a smile. And I mean, I kind of figured that out as I went along. And it's like, now I smile. And
you smile all the time. You laugh all the time.
And people like that. Yeah, I do have a distinctive laugh, I will say. And if I'm in a room and people hear me, they're like, oh yeah, Nancy Marshall's here.
Nancy's here. Yeah.
And that's part of my personal brand.
Yeah.
And people will talk about it to other people. So it kind of generates word of mouth marketing, which, as you know, is really the most valuable kind of marketing.
So earlier you kind of talked about influencers in passing. So I'm wondering, as you started with this list in DBase of 1,500 or so journalists, as time has evolved since you got started, what are some of the different categories of people that you do this kind of outreach for as the landscape has shifted over all these years? Or is it still just traditionally journalists that you're pitching for new stories?
Well, my agency has been handling the state of Maine Office of Tourism Public Relations since 1993.
Yeah.
So in that role, we work with travel writers or travel journalists. So that could be anything from somebody who writes for the Boston Herald about travel. There's a woman named Maura McCarthy who I've known for years, and she writes about ski and golf travel for the Boston Herald. But we also worked with Al Roker from the Today Show a few years ago when he came to Maine, and we worked on his itinerary. He wanted to do a broadcast from the Rocky Coast of Maine. So we organized exactly where he would go, where he'd do a story. And pretty much we were at his service while he was here, whatever he wanted. And I'll say that one thing, I think of myself as being a servant to the media. And a lot of people don't like to think of themselves like that. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to be anybody's servant. But I have learned that by coming across as being of service, journalists, they're more likely to trust you. And of course, I talk a lot about know, like, and trust. You want to know somebody, like them, ideally, and then trust that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. So that's been our mantra, I guess, at my, I have 6 employees, and basically all of them know that we need to be trustworthy. If we say we're going to call you back by a certain time, we're going to call you back. And if we say we're going to meet you or we're going to send somebody to meet you, we do it because our word is sacred.
All right. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about press releases. Many people say they're dead. They've been dead for years, yet people are still using them. What role do press releases play in today's digital marketing world?
Well, press releases basically have the who, what, where, why, and how of a story. And a lot of times journalists will, you might pitch them a story idea, either verbally or by email, but they'll be like, send me the release, because there's just a certain format that a release has that has all the facts in one place. And it shouldn't be, it might have a quote, it'll have contact information for the person who can do an interview. So it's kind of like one page with all the boilerplate that you need about a story. So I believe that press releases are still valuable. It helps a journalist or even an influencer tell your story better. It has all the information right there. And, whether you're, producing a TV show or somebody like Erin O'Valley, who we know has the show Maine Life here in Maine, she likes to have a press release too if she's going to do a story about a farm or a cheese shop or a lighthouse. It just tells the facts that she needs to relay to her audience, and it helps get things right. If you post something on Instagram, you might put a funny video or you might put a little blurb on Instagram, but it's not going to say who's the contact person and have a quote. It doesn't have all the things that a press release has in it.
All right. So it doesn't sound like you're immediately just sending out press releases to every journalist or even to the journalist you've handpicked. How do you start? How do you tease up the press release so that there's some interest, or to vet if there's some interest there?
Well, we actually do. Once a month on
Okay.
behalf of the Office of Tourism, we send out a press release with upcoming events to I don't even know what it's a few thousand people. So, or if I'm working with a client and they have a new product or a new service, we might send a press release to a huge list. But then we make a list of the people we really want to know or we want them to report on it. So, for example, I work with VIP Tires and Service, which is a franchise that they have 75 stores throughout New England. And if they have a new store, we're going to send a press release about it to everybody in the whole state. So that might be one of the New England states. But then we make a shorter list of who we want to be sure has that release. And we follow up individually, one by one, with the people we really want to report on it. And, you can't be obnoxious, call a reporter on the phone and say, "Did you get my release?" Because journalists are receiving sometimes hundreds or even thousands of press releases every day. And sometimes if you do that follow-up, they will say, "Oh, could you resend that to me?" So again, having that contact and doing the follow-up is really important. But you also know when to take no as an answer. And you don't want to be a pain in the you-know-what by continuing to follow up, because then they're just not going to take your calls.
Right.
And you don't want them to block you completely.
Right. No means no.
Yeah.
So how are you using platforms like LinkedIn and X to either connect with journalists or to keep building relationships with journalists?
Well, I use LinkedIn for thought leadership. If you have looked at my LinkedIn, you can see that I post regularly, several times a week. And I post articles that I write for Forbes.com. I publish a column in Forbes.com about public relations and marketing. I also write how-to columns for Main Biz. And I also produce content that's specifically for LinkedIn. So I use that for thought leadership. But the about section where you have about yourself on LinkedIn, that's highly searchable content. Like Google, if they're looking for something about you, Google is very likely to go to that about section. So everybody who's listening to this should take a new look at their about section on their LinkedIn and make sure it has all of your keywords, or, that it's really accurate, tells about your background and who you are. So yeah, I do find that a lot of journalists will, if I'm going to speak to them on the phone, sometimes they're even, while I'm speaking to them on the phone, they're looking up my LinkedIn to check me out and find out if I'm legitimate or not. And then you mentioned X. Of course, X, sometimes I'm like, who knows who's looking at this? But journalists have had a long-standing relationship with Twitter. Many of them have defected to other places like Blue Sky. There was a movement at one point where a lot of journalists were going over to Blue Sky. And I have to confess, I don't look at Blue Sky a lot. I kind of do periodic visits to Blue Sky, X, and Threads, for example. But I'm pretty consistent with LinkedIn. And for my personal stuff, I do look at Facebook and Instagram because that's how I kind of stay on top of what my friends and family are doing.
How has AI changed your job?
Well, AI basically is whoever those bots are. I'm still not sure exactly who they are or where they are, but they're going out and they're scraping. They're looking all over the World Wide Web to find whatever information they can and then bringing it back. So the more information you put out, the more content, the more those bots are going to be able to find out about you. And, interestingly enough, Rich, a few months ago, I was experimenting and I asked ChatGPT to write an obituary for Nancy Marshall because I was interested to see what it would show up. And they found a different Nancy Marshall because they wrote all about how I was a dog lover and I gave to charities supporting abandoned dogs and went on and on about dogs. And they must, I do like dogs, but I'm not known as a dog lover. So they must have found a different Nancy Marshall. And that actually was a reminder to me, if somebody's looking for Nancy Marshall, I want them to find this version of Marshall. So that was a reminder to me to keep putting content out there so those bots can find me and they know which one.
Absolutely. But has it changed the way that you are doing any outreach to the media or helped you write press releases?
Yes.
Or is that just not an area you're touching?
No, it has helped us with a variety of things, writing press releases, sometimes taking a look at an email and seeing if it could be reworded. And I'm experimenting with ChatGPT every day to see how it can make my job easier. But I will also say, Rich, that I still believe humans are really important. And, personal branding is personal, which means that is the word person in it. So I don't think that ChatGPT or any of the AI things are going to they're never going to replace me. And if you're sort of a vanilla, very boring person, maybe you can be replaced by bots. But I feel like all of us should be really developing our personal brand and what makes us unique. And again, putting that content out there in a variety of places so that AI is going to be sure to find you when people are looking for you.
It's one unconventional tip for media relationships that most people don't know, but it's been very effective for you.
What's one? Well, I try to show up as much as possible so that, again, when people see me, it leads them more to see that I'm active, I'm engaged. I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting this morning, and there were several reporters there, and I was sure to shake their hand and there was another, I have a polka dot dress on today. There was another reporter from Maine Biz, and she had a polka dot dress. So it's like, well, let's take our picture together. And then I put that out on Instagram. And again, that just kind of sends a message, not only to all journalists, but everybody. Like, here's Nancy schmoozing at a chamber meeting. So I guess that the advice would be, Rich, don't just sit at your desk writing press releases or emails all day. Show up in person, because then people see you as being accessible, engaged, involved, and friendly. Again, a smile on your face.
And I think it comes back to your superpower of actually just building and maintaining relationships coming from a very sincere place, but making those real world connections and those human connections.
Yeah, my mom, who's passed now, but she used to describe somebody she called a good time Charlie. And a good time Charlie is somebody who shows up at a party like in a big way, and they work the room. They're going around, they're slapping people on the back, and but that good time Charlie couldn't care less about anybody else except themselves.
Right.
And I never want to be that person. I mean, I might come in to a party and people will know I'm there, but I really want to know who else is there, and I want to make connections. And I also really put a premium on connecting both in person and online. So if I meet a new person at an event or at a party or at a restaurant, I try to connect with them on whatever social platform they're on. Hopefully it's going to be LinkedIn, because I'm really active there. But if they're primarily on Threads or whatever, I try to connect with them there. Because have you ever met somebody and then a few weeks later, it's like, oh yeah, I talked to that person and they clean out gutters and I need a gutter cleaner, but you can't remember that you connected with them, and then you can find them. So you always want people to find you when they need what you have to offer.
All right. If a listener wanted to implement a media relations strategy tomorrow, what actions would you recommend they take first?
Well, again, I think they should identify their goals. Like, who do they want? Who is going to be their buyer, the buyer of their services? And then who else is going to be able to influence their buyers? Who should know about it? And sometimes you don't need thousands and thousands of people to know about whatever you're doing. You might only need a handful of people. So if I was starting a new business or service, I would probably start with a lot of coffee dates and asking others to recommend who you should talk to. So again, that good old fashioned word of mouth marketing is still really important. And I do have a sheet that I put together for your listeners with 10 tips on generating earned media coverage. It's at marshallpr.com/10 tips, and 10 is spelled out. So that would be a checklist that you could follow if you're just getting started.
Awesome. And we'll have links to that in the show notes. Beyond the top 10 PR tips, if people want to learn more about you and more about Marshall Communications, how can they reach you online?
Well, if they do download that 10 tips sheet, they will be subscribing also, or they can subscribe to the Marshall Report, which is my monthly e-newsletter all about media relations and public relations. But also at prmaven.com, they can sign up for my monthly newsletter on personal branding. And if you're more interested in positioning yourself either as a thought leader or as a consultant or a go-to person as opposed to a company or organization, they should go to prmaven.com. And I did do a podcast on PR for 5 years, and I did 300 episodes. So those are all available too through my website.
Awesome. And we'll have links to those as well in the show notes. Nancy, it was awesome seeing you. Always great seeing you in town. And I'm sure we'll grab a coffee. or a lunch or a drink sometime soon.
I hope so, Rich. I always enjoy talking to you and always learn something from you also.
By the way, if you ever want to check out any of my 207 appearances, I regularly post them to my LinkedIn profile, so please go and check them out. If you enjoyed today's episode, but you may have missed a point or two, you can find the audio, the full transcript, a related blog post, and all the links that Nancy shared with us at our website, theagentsofchange.com/590. We've got more great content coming your way, so make sure you're subscribed to your favorite podcasting platform. Now, while everyone else is chasing viral video moments, we know that one genuine relationship with a journalist is worth more than 1,000 likes. It's time to stop scrolling and start connecting and become an agent of change.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.